time to bring in ESPN NFL analyst Dan Orlovsky, whose segment every week is brought to you by Ellicott Hotels. Fans, round up your family, friends, and coworkers for a fantastic game day experience at 500 Pearl. Reserve your pack and book your group event today at 500pearlbuffalo.com. All right, Dan, we've got an offense here that, is still experiencing lulls in the course of games. They're essentially playing a good quarter and a half of football on average each of the last 5 weeks, and with an injury-riddled defense, I think a lot of people were hoping the offense would be able to carry more of the burden. They have not, for whatever reason. We heard Brandon Beane last week say the offense is still searching for its identity. If you had to put your description on the offense and a potential identity right now, what would you say it is based on your observations, if there is one?
I really don't think they have a schematic identity. I think they have a philosophical identity, and that seems to be, like, in my opinion, reactive instead of proactive. I think it's also fair to say this was a really good game on the road versus a team that's playing really good football. And I think, when you play one of those teams that's so good defensively, the game, if Josh's interception, just a poor decision. Just a poor decision, forced throw. There's nothing that is so X and O in depth about it. It's cover two. He tries to force the whole shot. Just a poor decision. But it happens backed up in their own area, right? So you're like gifting the other team points. Dalton's fumble. Great play by it happens going into the red zone. So you're taking points off. So in a one-score game, you're sitting there, gosh, those two plays stand out a lot. I think that, when you watch and you go, okay, the no-huddle worked a little bit. They didn't do it as much as maybe I kind of thought they should have. And I think, one of my notes is, as I watched that game, two notes that stood out to me were it felt like they were in gun 2x2 a lot. Just in the shotgun, two guys on my right, two guys on my left. And you guys have heard me say this, right? This is why I say the identity is a little bit reactive. So we know teams want to play Josh a certain way, Patrick Mahomes a certain way, Joe Burrow a little bit, but they want to play these guys a certain way. Those two safeties, Shell, they're forcing you to play to the way that they want you to play. And my gripe a little bit with Buffalo's offense, I don't think the world's ending, but Buffalo's offense is, it's almost they oblige to that too much. All right, we'll play the way you want us to play, and it's almost you got to be in the mindset of no, we're going to do things, so you as a defense don't get to play the way that you want to play.
All right, but
it can't always be all right, we'll play to the style that you want us to, and this and that, and never do things to a defense to force the defense to then go, well, we can't play this style anymore. We have to adjust.
All right, so let's take that a step further. We know that Dawson Knox is still on IR. 12 personnel is kind of compromised as a personnel grouping right now. How do you flip that script and dictate?
Yeah, I think a little bit of the no-huddle helps, because I think Josh is smart enough to live at the line of scrimmage and get themselves out of bad plays and into really good ones. I think a little bit more variance in their run game, when it comes to a variety of run action. I think a little bit more of the RPO stuff that's just not 2x2 RPO. You remember last week I told you guys, you guys saw it too. They ran 6 different plays.
Right.
It wasn't the schematic masterpiece. And here's the thing. When you're playing teams that defensively want to sit in those two high shells, there's really 2 ways to get them out of it. You have to be very disciplined and hard-headed to force that extra guy down closer to the football. You have to be willing to pound the football a little bit. You have to be, and be very efficient and hard-headed with it. And then there's you guys have heard me say this. There's 2 ways to take shots or chunks in this league. There's 2 ways. You either have a freak that wins one-on-one coverage, or you play action them out of it. You play action concept them out of it. Because when teams are sitting there, think about it this way, guys. If the ball's on the right hash, right? And I don't care what personnel I'm in, but if I have a receiver out to the right into the boundary, and then I have a safety that's into the boundary as well, and then you can only have one other guy in the second level pass concept defense wise there. Like that, math wise, you can only have one. That's the guy that I constantly have to try to put in conflict. So I could take that receiver and push him vertical or push him on a post. And then there's got to be somebody that's coming from the other side at behind that linebacker, and then something that is in front of that linebacker to put that guy in conflict. And that doesn't happen enough, because that's the way that you get chunks on those defenses. And it's not just dropping back. It's just not. Too many teams do it in the NFL. Buffalo's just not the only guilty one. So there's a very simplistic way to do it that you can kind of dress up. But that's like one of those just very basic, simple ways to go about doing it.
Offensively, the Bills are way, way healthier than they are on the defensive side of the ball. What are your thoughts on, trying to come into a game where, and it certainly didn't look like this, the Bengals had the ball for 21 minutes in the first half.
Yeah.
And the Bills had like 15 plays or maybe even 20 plays total offensively in the first half. Is there some sort of is there any chance that maybe there's a philosophy saying, listen, we got to play our offense to make sure our defense is not on the field as much as they can, even though the defense is struggling to get off the field?
Yeah, I mean, there is Cincinnati, I think, was like third in the NFL when it came to time of possession last year. That's kind of who they are identity wise on offense. You guys asked, Chris, like, what's the identity of the Bills? Like, I could very clearly tell you the identity of the Bengals right now, because they're healthy, right. And so, like, Steve, it's like, if you just watch the way they went about it was like, hey, we're going to run the offense through Jamar. And if Jamar is going to get single coverage, we're throwing it to Jamar. And if Jamar is going to get doubled, which Buffalo doubled him a ton, it was like, hey, throw to Tyler. They got people to hurt you opposite that. And it was just this very play zone. It's going to be very efficient. They're going to run their RPOs, and they got a little play action. And so it's a beauty with the way that they go about it. There's something to be said about it. Again, I don't walk away from this game going, oh my gosh, what a bad offensive performance. Like, I have a ton of respect and admiration for how good Cincy's defense is. And if, Josh doesn't force that ball, that they don't get that kind of cheap score. And if Dalton doesn't fumble that, do they get and go get some points? So, I feel a little bit better than I thought I would from their offensive performance. But yeah, I think there's a little bit, but like, it doesn't, it doesn't just happen where she said, oh, you know what, we'll become a little bit more efficient, or we become a little bit more ball possession centric. And there's a method to go about it. There's a philosophical way that you go about doing that. And you got to get everybody on the team player wise in those roles that are very specific and important to them. And do I think Buffalo can get there to help them? Yes. I don't think that they showed that last week.
Do you think that Buffalo's offense is too dependent on players to win on their given assignments rather than scheming players open using the playbook and the scheming to help them win?
Yes. But I could say that about a lot of teams if I want to be fair to Buffalo. Yes. I remember when Tom went down to Tampa, I used to always say, like, they're so execution based. If everyone executes at a really high level, then they'll play well. And I think that's why you see some games you're like, oh man, they were really good. But the other team gets paid. They're going to make it hard on you. And like, we can't, yes, I want the guys to execute at a certain level, but am I asking them if they execute at a 10, is that the only way for success? Like, what happens if they're executing at an 8 at that play? Can I do something scheme wise, formation wise, motion wise to help that 8 become a 10 and result, And so
right.
I don't know if there's enough of that. You watch teams in the NFL, and like, not everyone's the San Francisco 49ers or the Detroit Lions when it comes to some of their unique scheme stuff. Even the Colts do some really cool stuff. But I do watch teams that I think are built somewhat similar to Buffalo. Like, I watched Cincinnati get into their 4x1 RPO a bunch. I don't watch Buffalo do that enough, in my opinion. Like I think the world of Jamar Chase. I think Steph's really good. We could put Steph by himself and say, hey, if you're going to cover him one-on-one, we're going to throw him the ball. And if not, we can go some run action away. We can go a 4-by-1 screen opposite. We can go a pass concept and help guys win versus zone or leverage. And so I watch. So my point is this, like, I do think that there's more room for growth. And again, I think their offense is okay right now, but it needs to be great. More room for growth when it comes to formations and motions to help those guys execute easier.
Yeah.
Right. So if you see this, as you see this on the horizon, Monday Night Football coming up against the Broncos, give us the Broncos coming off a bye. They beat Kansas City. They've won 2 straight after starting 1-5. Give us some insights what Russ Wilson's doing, Sean Payton, what you can expect in this matchup.
Yeah, so Russell's actually playing well. It's just the first 5 weeks of the year, their defense was historically bad. So Russell's playing good. They're absolutely designing things to push the ball down the field. He's got some players like Jerry Jeudy's a very good route runner. Sutton, big body. I think the pass catching outside of like Jerry Jeudy, their best pass catchers are honestly their backs. They're doing a really nice job getting their backs in the pass game, both check downs, screens. It's a heavy screen team. You'll see him under center, some play action shots. So their offense is doing a nice job. Their offensive line's running the football better than they had at the start of the year. So, I think like this is going to be a game where they got to cover really good low, and be very aware of the shots downfield in their play action game. Russell's doing a really nice job picking his spots with his legs as well. Way healthier and better moving than he was last year. And then defensively, I think, a couple of things, like they're getting some of their younger pass rushers on the field and they're starting to rush the passer really well. They're communicating way better on the back end. They're not getting nearly as many blown coverages. And so they're playing better defensively. Now, their game versus Kansas City was a little bit more of Patrick not playing well than, oh my gosh, this defense is locked down. So I do think there's going to be throws there for Josh. But it's gonna have to be, like I tell you, if there's one thing that I think you can get after them, it's field crossers. You can cross the field on this defense successfully. So that's got to be a part of their game plan.
So their defense, would you say the numbers are skewed by virtue of their horrible start? They're kind of raised the level of their play maybe to a middle of the pack defense since then.
Yes, absolutely. I think part Justin Simmons, they're all kind of pro safety, came back. Yeah. He's healthy. Surtain's playing at a really high level. And again, like they're young. Remember, they got rid of Randy Gregory, so they're young pass rushers. Browning's come on, and he's been really good. Mm-hmm. I think they've simplified their defense just a little bit. Like at the beginning of the year, they were just guys running uncovered. They were very quiet on defense, very quiet. Now, I would motion the heck out of this defense because teams have done it a little bit less than they were in the beginning of the year. Like when Miami hung a ton on them, it was Chicago had success against them. It was a ton of motions and they were very quiet. And so you would get guys popped uncovered. Essentially, I would motion them. I'm not talking like moving a guy from across the field. Like I would shift a formation and then motion a guy. I would motion one guy and then I would change the surface level constantly against their defense to force them to talk a ton. I think that's still a place where you can get after them.
When you see a game like this, Sean Payton has always had the reputation of being really an aggressive play caller. He's notoriously the surprise onside kick guy in the Super Bowl, that kind of thing. Has he shown much of that with Russ Wilson in this offense?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first play of the season was a surprise onside kick, to be honest with you. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
They're very aggressive. They'll go for it on fourth down. I think that I don't think they're overly aggressive, Steve. I think, now that Russell's settled in a little bit, this is not, it's funny. Like the whole conversation around Russell was like, can he get the ball out of his hands? That's not who he is. Like Russell wants to throw the ball downfield. He's going to want to hold the ball and throw it downfield, or you'll see 6 screens this game, all kinds of screens. So, he's going to be aggressive in that regard more so than, like hey, it's 4th and 6 from our own 35-yard line. We're going for it. I don't see that from him.
Yeah. Dan, thanks as always. That'll be interesting with that screen game. Bills had trouble defending screens earlier in the season. They're a bit better at it now, but Denver's going to test him on that for sure. So I think we're going to see a lot of that.
You know what they do really quick, Chris? Like the play action pass screen. That's something that Sean's always been good with, and it's become a bigger part in the past 2 or 3 weeks. They'll see 4 or 5 of them on Monday night.
All right. Thanks very much, Dan. Appreciate it as always. We'll catch up with you next week.